If the train stops without warning, don't look out. The night train was always half empty, the kind of route no one took unless they had to. I was traveling alone, heading back after a work trip that had stretched far longer than it should have. The carriage hummed with the steady clatter of the wheels against the rails, a rhythm so hypnotic it almost felt alive. I leaned against the cold glass, watching the blur of trees slip past in the darkness, their skeletal branches catching the moonlight like claws. The other passengers were quiet, most of them asleep, their faces half lit by the dim yellow bulbs overhead. Everything felt normal, routine, until the train lurched. There was no announcement, no gradual slowing of the engine. The train just stopped. Dead. The sudden silence was so complete it pressed into my ears. A few people stirred awake, confused, blinking into the half-light. I waited for the conductor's voice, for some explanation, but none came. My phone had no signal, which wasn't unusual for these stretches of countryside. But as the minutes stretched, unease pooled in my stomach. I remembered, then, something an old man on a previous trip had told me in a hushed, almost guilty tone: if the train ever stops without warning, don't look out the window. Just sit still. Pretend you're asleep. Don't look. At the time, I laughed it off as superstition. But now, the words clawed their way back into my mind, and I suddenly couldn't laugh. A low sound vibrated through the carriage. Not the familiar groan of metal or shifting brakes, but something deeper, almost like a growl. The hairs on my arms rose. Outside, the forest looked wrong, too still, as though every living thing had vanished. A man across from me, business suit, tie loosened, impatience written in every line of his face, sighed and leaned to peer out the window. I wanted to stop him, to tell him what I'd been told, but the words jammed in my throat. His breath fogged the glass. Then, slowly, his eyes widened, and his expression froze into something raw and unfiltered, pure terror. He never made a sound. Just pressed his face closer to the glass, as if something outside had him hooked. Then, in a motion so smooth it didn't look human, he stood up, slid the window latch open, and climbed out. No one stopped him. No one even gasped. We all just sat there, rigid, as if a weight had fallen over us. I could hear the crunch of leaves outside, his footsteps receding. Then, nothing. Not a single sound. The silence grew heavier. My throat was dry, but my eyes flicked against my will toward the glass. I caught the faintest flicker of movement beyond the trees. Something was there. No, many things. Shapes too tall and too thin, their limbs bending at angles that made no sense. They moved between the trees with a kind of liquid grace, flickering in and out of sight, as though the shadows themselves carried them. My pulse thundered in my ears. I wanted to look closer, to see, but the memory of that old warning burned bright in my head. I forced myself back into my seat, squeezing my eyes shut. Minutes, or maybe hours, passed like that. The lights in the carriage flickered. I heard faint tapping against the windows, like fingernails testing the glass. At one point, I felt the distinct sensation of being watched, of something pressing against the barrier between the train and the night. Then came the whispering. A low chorus of voices, not outside, but all around me, bleeding through the walls of the train. They didn't speak any language I knew, but the intent was clear. They were coaxing us, calling us to look, to step outside like the man before us. A few more passengers stirred, their eyes glassy, their movements sluggish. One by one, they rose and walked to the doors, slipping into the waiting dark. I stayed frozen, my nails digging into the armrest so hard my knuckles ached. I kept my eyes shut, fighting the instinct to know what was out there. The whispers grew frustrated, sharper, then finally faded. At last, the train shuddered, and with a violent jolt, it began to move again. The hum of the engine roared back to life, almost too loud, like it was trying to drown out what had just happened. When I opened my eyes, half the carriage was empty. No one spoke. The train never stopped again, and no conductor ever explained. By the time we reached the next station, I was shaking so hard I could barely stand. I stumbled off into the artificial light of the platform, desperate for the noise of civilization, for people, for anything but silence. But here's the part that unsettles me most. When I looked back, just before the train pulled away, I saw them. The empty seats. And pressed faintly into the glass of one window, a handprint. Too long. Too sharp. Almost like claws. I never ride the night train anymore. And if I ever do, I know this much: if it stops without warning, I'll keep my eyes shut. Because what waits outside isn't meant to be seen, and it never stops watching. But saying I never ride it again isn't the same as being free of it. The truth is, the memory follows me everywhere. At night, when the world is quiet, I hear it, that faint tapping, like nails testing glass. Sometimes it comes from my apartment window, sometimes from the mirror in my bathroom. At first, I thought it was my imagination, trauma replaying itself in little bursts of paranoia, but the sound has weight, a cadence that doesn't belong to nerves. It's the exact same rhythm I heard on the train that night, patient and deliberate, as if whatever was outside then knows where I am now. The strangest part is that people have started disappearing in ways that mirror what I saw. A co-worker vanished on his commute, last seen boarding a late-night service out of the city. A friend's sister never made it home from her train ride through the countryside. The news explains it with accidents, unsolved crimes, sometimes even suicide. But when I read the stories, I can't stop picturing the passengers I watched shuffle into the dark, their movements hollow, their faces blank, like puppets with invisible strings tugging them along. I don't believe these are coincidences. I think the train takes more than it carries. One night, weeks later, I woke up at 3 a.m. to the sound of wheels grinding against rails. The noise shouldn't have been possible, I live nowhere near the train line. Yet it rolled through my apartment walls, rattling the picture frames and making the floorboards shiver. My breath hitched. I didn't dare move. And then, just as suddenly as it came, the noise stopped, and my bedroom was drowned in silence so thick it felt physical. I swore I could feel the hum of an engine beneath me, like the bed had become another seat on that endless night train. The next day, my reflection betrayed me. I was brushing my teeth when I noticed that the fog bathroom mirror didn't clear the way it should. My face was visible, yes, but behind me, faint and wrong, a long shadow hovered. Not a trick of steam. Not a trick of light. It bent at crooked angles, with too many limbs pressed against the glass as though trying to pry through. And the worst part? My reflection smiled when I didn't. It smiled wide, unnatural, as though something on the other side of that surface had been waiting for acknowledgement. I smashed the mirror immediately, but even as shards clattered into the sink, I swear I heard a low, amused whisper echo in the fragments. I stopped sleeping after that. Or at least, I tried. But exhaustion has a way of bending rules, and one night I slipped under without meaning to. My dreams weren't dreams. I was back in the train carriage, the exact same seat, the exact same dim flickering lights. Only this time, the carriage wasn't half empty. It was full, every seat occupied, but the passengers weren't human. They wore human skin like ill-fitting coats, their faces stretched wrong, their jaws slightly unhinged. Their eyes, if you could call them that, were pools of black liquid that reflected the faint yellow glow above. And they all turned toward me in unison, tilting their heads like broken dolls. I tried to wake myself, clawing at the fabric of the dream, but the air grew thick, heavy, like I was drowning on land. One of the creatures leaned close, its neck stretching far beyond human limits. Its teeth brushed my ear as it whispered the same words I had heard in the reflection weeks earlier, "Come outside." I jolted awake, gasping, the sheets soaked in sweat. But when I looked around, the dream hadn't fully let go. On my nightstand, pressed into the wood as though burned there, were long, sharp claw marks, 4 lines, deliberate, waiting. Now I know this isn't just about the train. The train is a door, a vessel, a crossing point. Those creatures don't just linger in forests outside abandoned tracks. They followed me. They follow anyone who dares look when the train stops without warning. Maybe they seep into you through the act of seeing, like infection carried in a glance. And maybe the reason people vanish isn't because they board the train again, but because, once you've seen, the creatures no longer need the train at all. Sometimes, I wake in the middle of the night and hear the whistle of a train in the distance, low and mournful. It doesn't matter where I am, it finds me. And every time, I feel the weight of unseen eyes pressing against the glass of my windows, waiting for me to make the same mistake so many others did. To look. To let them in. I don't know how long I can resist. The tapping grows bolder now, almost impatient. Last night, the whispering wasn't outside the window, it was inside my room, curling just above my head, coaxing, taunting, reminding me that it never stops watching. And when I finally dared to open my eyes, the reflection in the black screen of my TV was smiling again, wider than before, mouthing those same 2 words. Come outside. The words fester in my head like a splinter I can't dig out. They don't fade when I cover my ears. They don't weaken when I pray for silence. They echo, patient, like a voice that has all the time in the world. And maybe it does. I've started to wonder if the thing whispering to me isn't bound by time the way we are, if every second I resist is just another second I stretch the inevitable. Because sometimes, when the air in my room goes still, I can feel a draft curling against my ankle, like the crack of a train door opening somewhere just behind me. I've stopped leaving the apartment after dark, but it doesn't matter. The world beyond my walls feels thinner now, less stable, like I'm teetering on the edge of two places. Shadows bend strangely in the corners of the hallways. Streetlights stutter, their glow pulsing in a rhythm I recognize, the same pattern as the train's dying bulbs. I hear footsteps in the stairwell when I come home late from work, heavy, deliberate, never climbing higher than the floor below me, as though keeping pace, just out of sight. The temptation to check, to look down one flight of stairs too many, gnaws at me. I know if I do, I won't like what I see waiting there. Sleep isn't rest anymore, it's a trap. Last night, I dreamt of my apartment, except it wasn't quite right, the wallpaper peeling in ways it never has, the windows stretched taller than they should be. And outside those windows? Endless tracks, running straight into the horizon beneath a sky so black it seemed to swallow the stars. The train stood there, door open, light flickering inside. I told myself not to move, not to listen, but then the voice came again, closer this time, warm against my ear. Come outside. When I turned, the walls of my apartment were gone, and I was already standing on the platform. When I woke up, I was still standing. My body had moved in the night. Bare feet pressed against the cold tile of the kitchen floor, one hand reaching for the doorknob like I'd been walking in my sleep, answering an invitation I don't remember agreeing to. That terrified me more than anything, that it doesn't just whisper anymore. It pulls. It guides. It wants me out there, under the night sky, where the tracks are waiting. And I'm not the only one. I've started noticing others who look the way I do, pale, restless, eyes ringed with sleepless shadows. People who jerk their heads when they hear a phantom whistle, who flinch at the sound of brakes screeching far too close. A woman in my building stared at me in the elevator last week, her lips trembling before she whispered, "Do you hear it too?" When I asked what she meant, her face strained wide and she shook her head violently, like she'd said too much. She got off 3 floors early, and I haven't seen her since. The worst came 2 nights ago. I was brushing my teeth, watching myself in the bathroom mirror, when the reflection didn't move the way I did. My hands froze, but the other me kept going, brushing slowly, deliberately, staring into my eyes with a hunger I couldn't stomach. Then, in perfect sync with the voice, its mouth opened wider than mine ever could and mouthed the words I've come to dread. "Come outside." I smashed that mirror too, but it didn't help. The glass scattered across the floor like little portals, each shard catching something wrong in the reflection, limbs too long, faces too close, lantern eyes gleaming in the dark. I cleaned the mess, but I know I didn't get all the pieces. Sometimes, when I step barefoot into the bathroom in the middle of the night, I hear the faintest crunch beneath me, like something sharp is still hiding in the ground. And when I do, the whispers are louder. I'm running out of ways to fight it. Covering the windows doesn't work. Destroying the mirrors doesn't work. It doesn't need openings anymore, it's already inside, curling its fingers through my thoughts, coaxing me toward the door. I've started finding train tickets in my jacket pocket, folded neatly, even though I haven't bought one. They're blank. No destination, no price, no name. Just a seat number and a time that hasn't arrived yet. Or maybe it already has, and I just haven't realized I'm late. Tonight, the tapping hasn't stopped. It's steady against the glass, relentless, like knuckles on the thin pane of my bedroom window. The curtains tremble as if someone is brushing against them, slow, deliberate, waiting for me to peek. My phone is dead, the lights are dimming, and the air smells faintly of rust and smoke, like hot metal cooling on rails. I think the train has already pulled up outside. And when I close my eyes, I see it clearly, the doors parting, the glow spilling out, the passengers waiting with their black eyes fixed on me. My reflection is already standing among them, smiling, hand outstretched. Its lips move without sound, but I don't need to hear the words anymore. I already know them. Come outside.